I had the good fortune of being a part of Victor King's amazing journey through sobriety and into fatherhood. When I think of the reasons why Victor was able to be so successful in this journey, it was not only because of the supportive team that worked with Victor along the way. It was not just because of the comprehensive resources through Boulder County that Victor was able to utilize, but it was mainly what Victor brings into the world on his own. Are you going to cry, Victor? Victor is hands down one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. He is also profoundly introspective as to his needs and the needs of his son. I would also say that Victor is a patient and hardworking man. One of the memories that I will always hold of Victor, other than the fact that he cries a lot, is when one winter day I was waiting to see Victor come into the office for a visit with his son, Octavius. Victor was riding a bike and he rode it across town in a soggy mess of a snowstorm. He was not late and he did not complain about the storm because he was going to see his son. That was the moment that I knew Victor King was going to be a dad and a great dad as well. So without further delay, I want to introduce you to Mr. Victor King.
Thank you. Can you hear me? First, I'd just like to thank you for this time and this opportunity to be here. It's just I really appreciate being able to speak with you. It means a lot to me. My story is a journey from isolation, addiction, and homelessness to becoming a motivated, responsible single parent. My free fall began on the streets and ended when I landed in jail. It was in jail that I was treated as a person and shown that people can recover. Not every case is hopeless. While I was sitting in jail, my first and only son was placed in foster care. This was truly my rock bottom, and I faced the grim reality that my life was out of control. Nobody had to tell me this was my last chance. I knew it. While in custody, I began one-on-one counseling with jail-based behavioral services. This was a lifeline that allowed me to understand some of the root causes behind my suffering. Within a few visits, I became more focused on improving myself and moved to the transition program run by Leslie Odega. The empowerment and encouragement I received through these programs helped to solidify my commitment to change. I was knee-deep in the legal system, but I was being helped instead of being punished. I was able to take anger management, emotional intelligence, handling difficult emotions, criminal thinking, meditation, and yes, even yoga during my 210 days in jail. By making the right choices, I was able to guide my life in a positive direction despite the circumstances. Getting my family involved is one of the greatest interventions that my first caseworker, Kim Maggio, accomplished. And this happened in two different ways. First, I was contacted in jail to ask about my immediate family. I was only able to give names and cities because I had not seen or spoken to them in over 8 years. So you can imagine my shock when they located my aunts and my cousins. I was provided with addresses and phone numbers and began to write letters and reconnect with my family. This single action, very early in my case, would have a profound impact down the road. Getting my family involved helped transform my positive momentum into permanent change. The second part is that my son was brought to visit me while I was in jail. I was called into the hallway and the sergeant walked me down to another room. This was all a complete surprise to me. But as I opened the door, I saw my son being held by my caseworker. After not seeing him for months, I was not sure how he would react. When my son reached towards me, I felt love, shame, pride, hurt, all in the same moment. My isolation was shattered and I had something to live for. I knew this because I was treated as a person, not an addict or a bum or a criminal. My definition of recovery is simple. I have a life worth living. I began adult drug court, a work release sentence, and had my open case with my son in family court. Either of these by themselves is daunting, but the combined pressure of all three created a scenario with no room for failure. It felt like I had 3 targets on my back. The first visits with my son were especially hard. I was a stranger to him, and he wasn't even comfortable being held by me. From the very beginning, Ann Baldwin was very clear about the many obstacles, but remained supportive and optimistic once I began to show her the strength of my commitment to my own recovery. Other people involved in my case noticed this as well, and a conversation began in the staff meetings for adult drug court about transferring me to family drug court. It is very rare for a criminal case to be transferred in this way, but an exception was made for me. This is another example that shows that shifting the focus on family and away from punitive punishment allowed my case to have more emphasis on reunification with my son and opened up doors that would not be available on the criminal side of the court. It was also during this time that I met John Dickinson. He was supervising visits from the department at the Iris location. And even though child visits are supposed to be a happy time, just walking into that building in the small, dreary rooms can create a very somber mood. Parents on edge, the children are confused, the foster parents are dropping off the kids, and the caseworkers are vigilant like hawks, watching every single moment. I mentioned John because he was the first male figure involved in my case. This created an opportunity that wasn't available to me before. A chance to talk to another father about the things that I was dealing with. The ability to connect with someone allowed for a more honest relationship and made the tense scene I mentioned earlier easier to deal with. I was allowed to suggest changes in the way that visits went, and he also tried new things, like videotaping me reading a story to my son so he could watch it before he went to bed every night with the foster parents. My case appeared hopeless, but I was working with someone who saw me as a person and that I can recover. Even though things were going good at this point, my overall scenario was still grim. My criminal history and my drug of choice was disqualifying me from most housing options. I would not stand a chance of getting my son back if I was still homeless. I had no savings. My son wasn't 100% comfortable with me. I had finally finished my work release sentence and I was living in the homeless shelter. The next event that happened to me was a great miracle. I received a message on Facebook from a cousin that I had never met or knew existed. My father was trying to reach me. I had not seen or talked to the man in 33 years. We talked on the phone, and in a few weeks he came down to meet my son. It was apparent to him that I was working hard to change my life, and he helped my dreams become a reality. I moved out of the homeless shelter, and he gave me money to get an apartment. He made a commitment to me and my son that our lives would not be spent on the streets. 2 generations of men raised without their father is not the legacy that I want to leave for my son. I spoke earlier about the search for my family in Texas and how important it was for me to reconnect with him. Now, at the same time that my dad had returned to my life, my family drove up from Texas to see me and my son. Rebecca Trago was instrumental in opening up the lines of communication, as her efforts to coordinate several conference calls months earlier kept my family connected with my case. And now she assisted with meeting them face to face. There was a family planning meeting, and they spent a few days up here. Sadly, my father chose not to meet my extended family, but nonetheless, I was still very content. This was a big meeting with family on both sides, foster parents. It was a very joyous occasion. After years of isolation, I had now the loving support of family and no longer carried the secret of my troubled past with me. Now I had started home visits with my son, and our bonds grew stronger. I signed up for every acronym I could. CCAP, WIC, SNAP, FSSS. The overnight visits were successful, and eventually he moved out of foster care and home with me. I cannot describe the whirlwind of emotions I dealt with during those times. Within a year's time, I was transformed from a homeless drug addict to a working parent. However, I was still in drug court and did not have full custody of my son yet. I was able to support and maintain myself while the graduation date approached. During this time, I was able to take advantage of another opportunity that I had found while I was in jail. One of my therapists thought I might make a good peer support specialist due to my insight on my own problems and the wisdom I gained from my journey. I applied for the job from jail, a handwritten resume that was very warmly received. At the time, I was told to reapply when I had been out for a year. That time had come, and I reapplied for the peer support position after attending a one-week training. I always thought that I would have to be ashamed of my past, but now I had a chance to use those experiences to help other people and to do it in a professional atmosphere. I was hired by Mental Health Partners and began work as a peer support specialist 8 months ago. After everything I had been through, I was now in a position to help those who traveled down the same road. I graduated drug court and had full custody of my son. I was assisted not just by one single program, but by many who worked together to make sure my outcome was positive and allowed me to have a life worth living. As I mentioned earlier, I did not meet many qualifications for housing, but Ann Baldwin was still committed to find a way to make things happen. My case went before the housing panel, and I was offered a chance to work with the Housing Stabilization Program. Kim Hamilton was very aware of my many responsibilities and patiently worked to support my own goals while fulfilling the requirements of the program. During this time, my wait on the Family Self-Sufficiency waitlist was over. After 9 months of waiting, I was denied. This was not surprising, and I was told from the very beginning to expect this. I reached out to caseworkers and began to get ready for the appeal hearing. I was able to successfully advocate for myself and express the importance of keeping my fragile family unit under the umbrella of Housing and Human Services. Thank you for your time.
Give you something, so you're gonna have to stay up here, okay? Just a second. Okay. Can you hear back there? So because of your speech and everything that you've done for us, we want to present you with this beautiful picture of you and Octavius. Okay?
Thank you for your time. She asked, how is my role at Mental Health Partners aiding in my recovery, doing peer support? For me, it is very rewarding. I'm working with individuals who I was homeless with, so I'm able to be a role model to those people who are in a bad situation and want to recovery, and at the same time, I can see just how hard it was for me to get in a position to help others, and so that constant reminder of what I don't go back to definitely helps.
So what are the next steps for you and your son?
She asked what the next steps are for me and my son. Well, now that we're in the family self-sufficiency program, I get to decide whether I want to either go back to school or to continue my career path. So that's a very huge decision, and I am not sure yet. I guess the isolation began when I lost my job and I was kicked out of my apartment, and I literally had, nowhere to go. I had burned bridges with family. I had burned bridges with sleeping on couches. So once you get to the point where, you've used every avenue of help and you're stuck in the streets, that's probably where my isolation began when I was homeless. I didn't contact family. I didn't contact friends. I just chose to self-medicate, and misery loves company, so you can find a lot of quick friends when you're in a bad situation. Yes.
Having worked with so many of us in this department, what's your biggest piece of advice for all of us to work with?
She asked, after working with so many agencies, what's the biggest piece of advice I could give to you guys? I guess my biggest piece of advice is when you see a person in front of you, to treat that person like a family member. Imagine, what if this person was your niece? What if this person was your brother? What if this person was an uncle? How badly would you want to help them transform their lives? And if you can apply that, not to one person, but to many persons, it will just show, and that's the best advice I can give. Yes? She asked what my relationship was like with the foster parents, and just this past weekend we went to the bike park at Valmont, so we have a very good relationship with the foster parents. I see them at least once a month. We stay in contact. Octavius remembers, their names and their kids' names, so it's a very good open relationship. Yes? She asked what the benefits were of participating in the family meeting process. I guess the main thing was to see things that you're not told as a client. When you're in the family meeting process and they're writing all these goals on the board and all these things that you've done, you can be caught by surprise. It's like, well, I thought I accomplished that, or I didn't know that was a problem. Now it's an issue. So it allows for transparency in the case, and then also the family members are often not involved. They don't know what a person has to go through once they're involved in that. So to be able to educate the family members on all the things and the positive and negative things that a person is doing, the family meetings are very, very beneficial for that. And it's just often when a person's, they're so busy trying to rebuild their lives that they don't have time to talk to family. They don't have time for these phone calls. So just being able to pause everything and look at what you've done is also nice. Sure.
What's your community look like now? Sounds like your family's not all here. So who are your supports?
She asked what my community looks like now and who are my supports. Well, the fact that I can call my family on the phone is something that I wasn't able to do before. So just to be able to reach out to them and know that I can make this phone call and I can call family, that's a huge thing that people take for granted. And when you're isolated and no one knows your struggles or your pains and you're trying to hide that, you can't do that with family. So I do consider them a very strong support, even though they're not here. And the rest of my supports, I have my job is a great support system. I was able to find a job that challenges me, that supports me, that educates me, and I'm working with people, from my past. So as much as you want to separate from people when you're trying to be sober, it's also good just to have some of those old friendships. So I'd say the family is the greatest support system. And I'm still sort of isolated, and it's hard being a single parent. And, you go to some of these parks and groups, and it's just like super moms all over the place. And it's, I just want my kid to get on the slide. So it can be kind of hard sometimes to... Well, again, I appreciate giving the opportunity to speak to you guys. Thank you very much.